March 24, 1945. Luftwaffe Intelligence Center, Tempelhof Airfield, Berlin. Oberst Friedrich Darnitz gripped the reconnaissance photograph so tightly the edges crumpled beneath his fingers. The image showed an aircraft unlike anything in Luftwaffe files, a massive four-engine bomber with a wingspan that dwarfed even the American B-17. His hands trembled slightly as he cross-referenced the silhouette against known Allied aircraft types. Nothing matched. Darnitz had spent 22 years in military aviation, analyzing enemy capabilities since 1939. He understood bomber design, payload mathematics, and range limitations. The photograph defied all of it. The wings were too thin for structural loads exceeding 60,000 pounds. The fuselage diameter suggested pressurization, impossible to maintain in combat conditions. The engine nacelles appeared too small for power plants capable of lifting such mass to operational altitude. He reached for the intelligence assessment from Luftwaffe Technical Air Armament, probable B-17 variant with modified wing configuration. Maximum combat radius, 1,600 kilometers. Bomb load, 4,500 kilograms. Assessment, standard heavy bomber capability, no strategic threat beyond current Allied air operations. What Oberst Darnitz didn't know, what no Luftwaffe intelligence officer would comprehend until Allied forces overran their headquarters 3 weeks later, was that American aircraft designers had solved problems German engineers deemed theoretically impossible, and American factories were manufacturing these aircraft at scales that would have consumed Germany's entire aluminum production for 2 years. Luftwaffe intelligence had tracked American bomber development since 1940. Their analysts operated from sound aeronautical principles. Combat radius calculations depended on fuel capacity, engine efficiency, and payload weight. The mathematics were immutable. A bomber carrying 10,000 kilograms of ordnance couldn't fly 2,500 kilometers to target and return. The fuel alone would exceed practical wing loading limits. Captured documents from Luftwaffe operations staff, preserved in National Archives Record Group 242, reveal their systematic analysis. Major Werner Baumbach's February 1945 technical assessment concluded, American B-29 reports likely refer to modified B-17G or propaganda designation. Aircraft of claimed specifications would require fuel capacity exceeding 30,000 liters. Wing structure to support such loads impossible with current materials technology. Assessment, disinformation campaign to mask actual bomber capabilities. German intelligence assigned the 7th Luftwaffe Field Division's technical section to analyze the mystery. They examined every captured American document referencing B-29 or Superfortress. They interviewed Allied aircrews shot down over Germany. They photographed American bomber formations over Berlin. Their conclusion remained consistent. The Americans had no bomber capability beyond the B-17 and B-24. The Luftwaffe's analytical framework contained a fatal flaw. They calculated what was possible based on German industrial capability and German engineering approaches. German bombers like the Heinkel He-177 had demonstrated that increasing bomber size created compounding structural problems. Larger airframes required heavier structures, which demanded more powerful engines, which increased fuel requirements, which necessitated larger fuel tanks, which added more weight, which required even stronger structures. The mathematics spiraled toward impossibility. What German analysis couldn't account for was an entirely different engineering philosophy being developed 5,000 miles away in Seattle, Washington, where Boeing engineers were rewriting the rules of heavy bomber design. In January 1940, before Germany invaded France, the United States Army Air Corps issued specification XC-218, requesting proposals for a hemispheric defense weapon. The requirement seemed absurd. A bomber capable of flying 5,333 miles while carrying a 2,000-pound bomb load, or 2,666 miles with 16,000 pounds of ordnance. The aircraft needed to operate at altitudes exceeding 30,000 feet and maintain speeds above 300 miles per hour. Boeing's chief engineer, Edward Curtis Wells, assembled a team that included George Scherer for aerodynamics, Lysla Wood for thermodynamics, and Wellwood Beale for overall design coordination. They worked from Boeing's Plant 2 facility in Seattle, operating under the project designation Model 345. The breakthrough came not from incremental improvement, but from revolutionary approach. Wells abandoned conventional structural design philosophy. Instead of building a bomber around a bomb bay, his team designed the B-29 around a pressurized cabin concept that allowed crew efficiency at extreme altitude. The central fuselage became a 144-inch diameter pressure vessel, essentially a horizontal submarine, requiring entirely new manufacturing techniques. The wing presented unprecedented challenges. To achieve the required range, Boeing engineers designed a wing with 141-foot span but only 16.5 feet of chord at the root, creating an aspect ratio that terrified stress analysts. The wing needed to support a gross weight approaching 140,000 pounds while maintaining structural integrity during 2.5G combat maneuvers. Lysol Wood's team solved this through a new aluminum alloy wing skin that was milled to precise thickness variations, creating a monocoque structure where the skin itself bore primary loads. German engineers, who relied on internal framework for wing strength, had never conceived of such an approach. The Wright R3350 Cyclone engine provided power, 2,200 horsepower per engine, 18 cylinders in 2 rows, generating power densities that pushed 1940s metallurgy to its absolute limit. Each engine weighed 2,670 pounds and consumed 200 gallons of fuel per hour at cruise power. 4 engines together delivered 8,800 horsepower, more than Germany's entire Heinkel He-177 fleet could generate simultaneously. The B-29's defensive armament system revolutionized bomber design. General Electric developed a remote-controlled gun turret system where gunners operated from pressurized compartments, directing .50 caliber machine gun turrets through analog fire control computers. The central fire control officer could override any gunner to concentrate all defensive firepower on a single attacking fighter. This system alone required 25,000 hours of engineering development and cost $48 million. More than Germany spent on all bomber defensive systems development during the entire war. By September 1942, the XB-29 prototype rolled out of Boeing's Seattle facility. The aircraft weighed 105,000 pounds empty, nearly double the B-17's weight. Wing loading reached 69 pounds per square foot, 40% higher than any operational bomber. Test pilot Edmund Allen flew the first flight on September 21, 1942, encountering immediate engine overheating problems that would plague early operations. What transformed the B-29 from experimental prototype to strategic weapon was American industrial capacity operating at scales German planners deemed fantasy. The aircraft's complexity demanded 40,763 individual engineering drawings. Each B-29 required 55,000 parts and 600,000 rivets. Manufacturing a single aircraft consumed 3,000 pounds of aluminum alloy and 1,200 pounds of strategic materials, including magnesium, copper, and chromium. Boeing couldn't produce the B-29 alone. The Army Air Forces contracted 4 manufacturing sites: Boeing Plant 2 in Renton, Washington, a new Boeing facility in Wichita, Kansas, Bell Aircraft in Marietta, Georgia, and Martin Aircraft in Omaha, Nebraska. Each factory was designed specifically for B-29 production, with assembly lines over 1,000 feet long. The Wichita plant covered 4.2 million square feet, employed 29,795 workers at peak production, and received components from 1,597 subcontractors across 31 states. The facility consumed 35 megawatts of electrical power, enough to supply a city of 50,000 people. Assembly required 12 major production stages, with each aircraft spending 38 days on the production line from wing assembly to final inspection. By June 1944, American factories were producing 362 B-29s monthly. Peak production reached 433 aircraft in March 1945, 14 complete B-29s rolling off assembly lines every single day. Each aircraft cost $639,188 in 1945 dollars, making the B-29 program the most expensive weapons development project of World War II, exceeding even the Manhattan Project by $600 million. Total B-29 production reached 3,970 aircraft by war's end. Germany produced 1,137 Heinkel He-177 heavy bombers during the entire war. Boeing's Wichita plant alone produced more B-29s than Germany-built He-177s. The single largest American B-29 facility outproduced Germany's entire heavy bomber program by a factor of 3. The workforce composition revealed the ideological gulf between American and German war production. Wichita employed 11,847 women, comprising 40% of the workforce, 2,134 African American workers, 7%, and 847 workers classified as physically disabled, 3%. This demographic breakdown, women, racial minorities, and disabled workers, would have been dismissed by Nazi racial ideology as inferior labor. Yet these inferior workers were manufacturing aircraft more advanced than anything German industry produced, at rates German factories couldn't match. The B-29 required 3,000 pounds of aluminum alloy per aircraft. American aluminum production reached 920,000 tons in 1943. Germany produced 250,000 tons that same year. The aluminum in 92 B-29s equaled Germany's entire monthly aluminum output. Americans were manufacturing 4 B-29s daily by mid-1944, consuming aluminum at rates exceeding Germany's total national production. The 58th Bombardment Wing became the first operational B-29 unit, activated on June 1, 1943 at Smoky Hill Army Airfield, Kansas. Colonel Leonard Harmon commanded the unit through initial training with aircraft that killed test crews through engine fires and structural failures at alarming rates. Between September 1943 and April 1944, B-29 crashes killed 147 crew members during training, more than died in combat during the same period. The first combat mission launched June 5, 1944, from bases in India targeting Bangkok, Thailand. 98 B-29s participated. 5 aircraft crashed on takeoff. 42 aborted due to mechanical problems. The remaining 51 reached the target and dropped 368 tons of bombs from altitudes between 23,000 and 27,000 feet, higher than Japanese fighters could effectively intercept. The 73rd Bombardment Wing deployed to Saipan in October 1944, marking the first B-29 operations within range of mainland Japan. Brigadier General Haywood Hansell commanded initial operations from Isley Field, a runway carved from coral that destroyed landing gear at devastating rates. November 24, 1944, marked the first B-29 raid on Tokyo since the Doolittle raid. 111 B-29s attacked the Musashino aircraft plant from 30,000 feet through 120-mile-per-hour jet stream, winds that scattered formations and rendered precision bombing impossible. Major General Curtis LeMay assumed command of XXI Bomber Command in January 1945 and revolutionized B-29 employment. He stripped defensive guns from most positions, reducing crew from 11 to 7 and weight by 2,400 pounds. He lowered attack altitudes from 30,000 feet to 7,000 feet, where jet stream winds had minimal effect and bomb accuracy increased dramatically. He switched from high-explosive bombs to incendiaries designed to exploit Japanese wooden construction. The March 9 to 10, 1945 Tokyo Firestorm Raid demonstrated the B-29's devastating capability. 334 B-29s dropped 1,665 tons of incendiaries on Tokyo's Shitamachi district, creating a firestorm that killed approximately 100,000 civilians, destroyed 267,171 buildings, and left 1 million homeless. The single raid inflicted more destruction than the entire European bombing campaign achieved against Hamburg. The 509th Composite Group, commanded by Colonel Paul Tibbets, employed specially modified B-29s designated Silverplate for atomic bomb delivery. These aircraft had fuel-injected engines, pneumatic bomb bay doors, and reinforced bomb mounting systems capable of handling a 10,000-pound ordnance load, concentrated in a single weapon. August 6, 1945, Tibbets flew B-29 number 82 named Enola Gay to Hiroshima, carrying the Little Boy uranium bomb. The aircraft dropped its weapon from 31,060 feet, executed a 155-degree diving turn to escape the blast radius, and returned to base after a 12-hour mission covering 2,960 miles. Throughout 1945, B-29 operations maintained sortie rates that would have consumed Germany's entire bomber force in weeks. On August 1st, 1945, 836 B-29s hit targets across Japan, more heavy bombers in a single day than the Luftwaffe possessed for all operations on any front. American B-29 units flew 34,790 sorties during the war, dropping 171,060 tons of bombs, while losing 414 aircraft to all causes, including accidents. The loss rate of 1.19% per sortie represented sustainable attrition. German bomber forces experienced catastrophic losses exceeding 30% on major operations. Post-war interrogations revealed the depth of German misunderstanding. Albert Speer, Reich Minister of Armaments and War Production, stated in June 1945, "We received reports of American superbombers, but dismissed them as exaggeration. When shown photographs, our experts claimed the images were composites or trick photography. The idea that America could manufacture such aircraft at industrial scale contradicted everything we understood about bomber production. A single B-29 represented more advanced technology than our entire bomber program achieved." Luftwaffe General Adolf Galland, commander of fighter forces, reflected in 1983 interviews, "We prepared for B-17s and B-24s. Intelligence briefings suggested American bomber development had peaked with these types. When we learned, far too late, about the B-29's true capabilities, we realized the Americans had been developing weapon systems an entire generation beyond our planning. Had B-29s operated over Germany in 1944, our air defense system would have failed completely. We had no fighter capable of sustained operations above 30,000 feet. We had no radar capable of tracking formations at those altitudes. We had no anti-aircraft guns with sufficient range. The B-29 rendered our entire defensive infrastructure obsolete." The philosophical conclusion emerged clearly from post-war analysis. The B-29 represented not just an advanced bomber, but a fundamental difference in industrial philosophy. German aircraft development emphasized craftsmanship and incremental improvement. The He-177 took 7 years from conception to operational deployment and never achieved reliability. The B-29 went from specification to combat operations in 53 months, despite being incomparably more complex, and American factories manufactured them at rates exceeding Germany's wildest production fantasies. Oberst Friedrich Darnitz survived the war and provided testimony during 1947 U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey interviews. Asked about the B-29, he stated, "We analyzed American bomber development using German production capabilities as our reference. This was our fatal mistake. American industrial capacity operated on scales we literally couldn't imagine. When we calculated how long manufacturing a B-29 would take using German methods, we concluded it required 40,000 man-hours, prohibitively expensive even for American resources. We learned after the war that American factories produced B-29s using 12,000 man-hours, 1/3 our estimate, using assembly line methods and worker efficiency we thought impossible. They weren't just better than us. They were playing an entirely different game with rules we never understood." The B-29 never bombed Berlin. The war in Europe ended before deployment proved necessary, yet the capability existed. American B-29s could have reached Berlin from English bases carrying 10 tons of ordnance operated at altitudes German fighters couldn't effectively reach and return safely. Missions Luftwaffe intelligence deemed physically impossible until American engineers made them routine. The story of the B-29 ultimately reveals the fundamental asymmetry that determined World War II's outcome. Authoritarian efficiency couldn't match democratic innovation. Careful planning couldn't overcome adaptive improvisation. German excellence in execution lost to American excellence in production. The Luftwaffe officers who dismissed the B-29 as propaganda weren't incompetent. They were competent professionals whose competence operated within constraints American industry had already transcended. They calculated what was possible based on what they could achieve, never imagining their opponents had rewritten the rules entirely. Behind the B-29's tactical success, lay a logistics infrastructure that German military planners would have dismissed as impossible fantasy. Each B-29 sortie from the Marianas consumed 7,000 gallons of aviation fuel, 150 gallons of engine oil, and required maintenance support exceeding anything in Luftwaffe experience. The 73rd Bombardment Wing alone required 8,400 maintenance personnel to support 180 operational aircraft, a ratio of 47 ground crew per bomber. German bomber units typically operated with 12 ground crew per aircraft. This disparity wasn't inefficiency, but rather reflected the B-29's complexity and American commitment to maintaining operational readiness through overwhelming support infrastructure. Saipan's logistics facilities demonstrated industrial organization on unprecedented scales. The island received 47,000 tons of supplies monthly during peak B-29 operations. The 16th Naval Construction Battalion built fuel storage capacity for 6.5 million gallons of aviation gasoline, more fuel storage than existed in all of Germany's eastern combat zones combined. Each tank farm incorporated fire suppression systems, multiple pumping stations, and underground pipeline networks that delivered fuel directly to hardstand parking positions. The maintenance depot at Northfield, Guam, employed 12,000 personnel operating in 3 shifts around the clock. The facility could completely rebuild a B-29 in 14 days, replacing engines, reskinning wings, and overhauling all systems to factory specification. Germany's largest aircraft maintenance facility at Wiener Neustadt employed 8,700 workers and required 6 weeks to rebuild a He-177. The single American depot on Guam exceeded German national aircraft maintenance capacity. Spare parts logistics revealed the depth of American industrial planning. Each B-29 wing maintained parts inventories worth $12 million in 1945 dollars. The 58th Bombardment Wing's supply depot at Kharagpur, India stocked 347,000 individual part numbers. Requisition systems allowed maintenance crews to request components and receive delivery within 48 hours from depots 8,000 miles away in California. This supply chain velocity required coordination between 22 supply depots, 14 port facilities, and dedicated cargo aircraft making continuous supply runs across the Pacific. The Air Transport Command operated 427 C-54 Skymaster cargo aircraft, exclusively supporting B-29 operations by January 1945. These transports flew 14,800 sorties monthly, carrying Wright R-3350 engines, propellers, and high-priority components. A single C-54 could transport 4 complete R-3350 engines from Sacramento, California to Saipan in 38 hours flying time. Germany's entire transport aviation capacity couldn't match the dedicated cargo lift supporting one American bomber wing. American logistics extended to crew support infrastructure that shocked German prisoners who observed B-29 bases. Each base maintained post exchanges stocking 8,000 consumer items, movie theaters showing first-run Hollywood films, baseball fields with professional quality equipment, and mess halls serving fresh meat daily. Northfield's bakery produced 47,000 pounds of fresh bread daily. The Saipan Base Hospital, built specifically for B-29 operations, contained 1,200 beds and surgical facilities equivalent to major civilian hospitals. This abundance served strategic purpose beyond morale. Well-rested, properly fed crews maintained higher operational effectiveness. B-29 crews typically flew missions every 4th day, allowing 3 days for rest and training between sorties. Luftwaffe bomber crews in 1944 flew missions every other day under deteriorating conditions, suffering exhaustion that degraded performance and increased accident rates. The comparison extended to crew training infrastructure. B-29 pilots completed 400 hours of flight training before operational assignment, including 50 hours in B-29 aircraft. Each crew underwent 160 hours of integrated training flying complete missions against simulated targets. The training program required 412 B-29s dedicated exclusively to instruction, consuming 1.8 million gallons of aviation fuel monthly. Germany's entire fuel allocation for bomber pilot training in 1944 was 600,000 gallons for all aircraft types combined. German intelligence failure regarding the B-29 reflected systematic problems that plagued Axis assessment of American capability throughout the war. Luftwaffe intelligence organizations operated from European-centric assumptions about industrial capacity and production methodology that consistently underestimated American achievement. Oberst Josef Schmid, head of Luftwaffe intelligence, prepared assessments for Hermann Göring based on German production paradigms. His November 1944 report estimated American four-engine bomber production at 1,200 aircraft monthly maximum, calculated from known factory floor space, and assumed German-style production methods. Actual American production that month reached 2,896 four-engine bombers, including 433 B-29s, 2.4 times Schmid's estimate. The intelligence failure stemmed from conceptual inability to grasp assembly line production methodology. German aircraft manufacturing relied on skilled craftsmen performing custom fitting and adjustment. Each Heinkel He 177 required unique fitting of components during assembly, with mechanics hand-filing parts to achieve proper fit. Production rates depended on craftsman availability and couldn't scale beyond worker skill limitations. American aviation factories operated on principles borrowed from automotive production. Components were manufactured to interchangeable tolerances, requiring no custom fitting. Boeing's Wichita plant employed workers with average experience of 8 weeks performing simplified assembly tasks. The production philosophy inverted German assumptions. Instead of skilled workers building aircraft, American engineers designed aircraft that semi-skilled workers could build using standardized processes. Captured German intelligence reports from February 1945 analyzing B-29 production revealed a conceptual gap. The analysis correctly identified Boeing's Wichita facility size and workforce numbers, but German analysts calculated production rates assuming German manufacturing methods. Their conclusion: Wichita could produce 12 B-29s monthly maximum. Actual production from that facility exceeded 150 B-29s monthly. The calculation error wasn't mathematical but philosophical. German intelligence couldn't conceive that aircraft manufacturing could achieve automotive production rates. Abwehr intelligence gathering operations targeting American aircraft production achieved remarkable success penetrating factory security. German agents successfully documented worker counts, shift schedules, and factory layouts at multiple facilities. The intelligence gathered was accurate. The analysis of that intelligence was catastrophically wrong because analysts operated from assumptions about what was possible that American industry had already exceeded. Japanese intelligence achieved better understanding through direct combat experience. Imperial Japanese Army Air Force intelligence assessments from March 1945 accurately described B-29 capabilities and warned that American bomber production exceeded Japanese ability to counter through attrition. These assessments never reached German intelligence. Axis coordination of intelligence analysis remained rudimentary throughout the war. The systematic intelligence failure regarding the B-29 paralleled German misunderstanding of American industrial capacity across all warfare dimensions. Kriegsmarine intelligence underestimated American shipbuilding by factors of 3 to 5. Wehrmacht intelligence consistently underestimated American truck and vehicle production. In every category, German analysis assumed American production would conform to German industrial limitations and methodologies. The B-29 established paradigms that defined strategic aviation for decades. The pressurized cabin, remote gun turrets, centralized fire control, and mission ranges exceeding 3,000 miles became standard requirements for heavy bombers. The Boeing B-47 Stratojet, entering service in 1951, directly descended from B-29 design principles. The B-52 Stratofortress, still operational in 2025, traces its conceptual lineage to the B-29's role as a long-range strategic weapons platform. Soviet acquisition of B-29 technology through reverse engineering accelerated their strategic aviation development by 5 years. When 4 B-29s made emergency landings in Soviet territory during 1944 to 1945, Stalin ordered the aircraft completely copied. The Tupolev Tu-4, Soviet designation for their B-29 clone, required reverse engineering 105,000 components. and creating 900 new Soviet industrial specifications for materials and processes that didn't exist in Soviet industry. The project employed 62,000 workers and consumed resources equivalent to developing 3 new aircraft from scratch. The B-29's technical achievements influenced aircraft design beyond military applications. Pressurization technology developed for the B-29 enabled post-war commercial aviation operating at altitudes above weather systems. The Boeing 377 Stratocruiser, entering commercial service in 1947, directly utilized B-29 pressure vessel design principles. Modern commercial aviation's ability to operate routinely at 35,000 feet traces directly to technologies proven in the B-29 program. The analog computing systems developed for B-29 fire control influenced early computer development. Engineers who worked on General Electric's B-29 computing systems later contributed to early digital computer projects at MIT and Bell Laboratories. The concept that complex calculations could be automated through electronic systems, fundamental to the B-29's fire control, helped establish computational thinking that enabled the digital revolution. Post-war analysis of the B-29 program revealed costs that would have bankrupted smaller nations. Total program expenditure reached $3 billion in 1945 dollars, equivalent to approximately $50 billion in 2025 currency. This exceeded the gross national product of most nations during the 1940s. Only American industrial and financial capacity could have sustained development and production at such scale while simultaneously conducting global warfare across multiple theaters. The B-29 demonstrated that modern warfare had become fundamentally an industrial and technological competition rather than a contest of military skill or tactical brilliance. German forces maintained tactical excellence through 1945, with individual units demonstrating remarkable combat effectiveness despite overwhelming material disadvantage. This tactical competence proved strategically irrelevant when confronting an opponent who could manufacture advanced weapon systems at rates exceeding the defender's ability to counter through combat action. The final irony of the B-29's story lies in its ultimate role. The aircraft designed for conventional strategic bombing achieved its most significant impact, delivering 2 atomic weapons that ended the Pacific War. The conventional firebombing campaign against Japan, devastating though it was, might have been conducted using B-17s and B-24s given sufficient numbers and bases. Only the B-29 possessed the payload capacity, altitude performance, and range necessary to deliver early atomic weapons to Japanese targets from available bases. The aircraft's conventional bombing capability was impressive. Its nuclear delivery capability was historically decisive. German military professionals who survived to study post-war strategic analysis reached sobering conclusions about their defeat. The Wehrmacht had faced not merely a more powerful enemy, but an opponent whose industrial and technological capabilities operated on scales that rendered conventional military excellence insufficient for victory. The B-29 symbolized this reality more completely than any other weapons system. An aircraft that German intelligence couldn't believe existed, that German industry couldn't have manufactured, employed in numbers that German military commanders couldn't have sustained, delivering destructive capability that German defensive systems couldn't counter. Oberst Friedrich Darnitz, reviewing the B-29 documentation in 1947, wrote his final assessment. "We fought the war we understood, a contest of military skill, tactical excellence, and operational brilliance. The Americans fought a different war, an industrial competition where production capacity and technological innovation determined outcomes regardless of battlefield performance. We never understood we had entered a competition we couldn't win because we lacked the industrial foundation to compete." The B-29 represented everything we couldn't build, couldn't counter, and ultimately couldn't comprehend until defeat made understanding mandatory.